Okay, so we're live again. This is live stream 3, and today I'm joined by my special guest, just Steve King, and our subject is going to be REST operations. Welcome, Steve. Thanks for joining us. That's great. So just introduce yourself to my audience. My audience might not all know you, but I'm sure a lot of them do.
They might know the beard. It's how most people recognize me these days. So I'm Steve McDougall, otherwise known as just Steve King. Everywhere else, I do API stuff on YouTube, mostly PHP, a little bit of Golang. I try to do more than just APIs, but then I realized even with Tailwind, I can't really build front ends. So I'm just going to call it a day, stick to the back end, and say that a JSON response is a pretty UI. So that's me. I'm an API guy. I'm here to talk about APIs.
Wise life choice. Wise life choice. I'm the same. I don't touch front end. Front end is just crazy these days. I just
mental, isn't it? It's like there's so many different JavaScript runtimes. And did you see jQuery 4 got released?
Right, I might check it out.
jQuery 4 just got released. The only thing that I was disappointed at is that they didn't follow any sort of ES6 module where you could, like, I don't know, import something from jQuery.
Right.
That would have been a cool way to do it, but no. It's still got the God object and away it goes.
Yeah. Oh, well, we'll see how that one goes. I used to didn't mind a bit of jQuery, and then I learned a bit of Vue, and then things just started going too crazy for me, so I just stick with backend. My happy place. Right, let's have a look at what we're going to cover. So today we're going to have a look at REST operations. So in the first bits leading up to where we've got to so far, what we've looked at, we've just done a couple of get operations, one on a collection and one on items. But today we're going to have a look, because we're moving on to the next section of the course now, or I'm recording the next section of the course. So we're going to have a look at all the rest of the operations, which will be post, delete, put, patch. And we're going to also have a look at head and options. We're going to have a look at what they all do, talk about things like idempotency and safe, whether the content is cacheable. Do we need to send a representation with a request? Do we need a representation with a response? And a couple of other bits, any gotchas involved and things like that. So I got this legend onto the show to come and help us out with the answers. I did a bit of work over the weekend on the Flights API in between children's parties and visiting my parents. And so I have something to demo with it. So we'll look at the questions. Steve will give us the textbook answer, and then we'll check my homework and see if I've been building this thing correctly. Sound like a deal, Steve?
No pressure.
No pressure. No pressure. Okay. Right. So these are the questions. I've shared this online on like LinkedIn and Twitter today. So some of you might have already seen this, but basically here are all of the REST operations. We're going to go down these one by one. First and foremost, we need to know what each of them do. Then we're going to ask, is it idempotent? So obviously you're going to need me to explain to you what idempotency is. Probably, is it safe? And then again, just those questions which we mentioned. So, yes, Steve, we'll start off with a get collection. Are you happy to tell us what this does?
Yeah. So, I mean, when you're doing a get request to a collection, you're asking for multiple resources at once. You're saying, I'm interested in flights. I'll use the flights example because it's what you're building. I want to get all flights based on any potential parameters I might also give you. I might want you to filter to flights to Mumbai, or I might want to filter to flights that only arrive in London Heathrow, for example. But I want to be able to ask for a collection and dynamically filter what you give me using my query parameter.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay, so the next question then, is it idempotent? So Do you want to explain this, or do you want me to explain it? You'll probably give a better explanation off the top of your head, which is why I've already cheated and I've got one on my screen. But
I am super interested to hear what your thoughts are on this one.
all right. Okay, I'll share this with everyone because so idempotency, this is what I've got here. So a client can make the same call repeatedly while producing the same result. So you're going to make the same request and get the same result in each time. So every request that you send will have the same effect as making that first initial request. That sound good to you, Steve?
Yep, it sounds pretty textbook.
All right. And then safe, might as well, while we've got it on the screen, safe means that the client can invoke an operation with the explicit, this does sound very textbook, this one. Safe means that the client can invoke an operation with the explicit knowledge that it's not going to change the state of the resource on the server. So any requests that you make, you're not going to change anything. So quick example, because I think because of the way that's worded, if you send a GET request, you're not going to change a resource on the server. You're going to receive requests, receive resources back. However, if you send a delete, you're obviously going to change resource on the server. It's pretty extreme. You can actually remove that resource from the server. So that will be described as not safe. Would you agree with that, Steve?
100%, yeah.
Alrighty, let's go back to our sheet. So a GET collection, is a GET collection idempotent?
Not even slightly.
Hang on. Yeah.
The thing with a GET collection is that if you send a request to get all flights now, and then you send the same request in an hour, new flights could have arrived or been inputted that match that specific description or that parameter that you are looking for. Let's say, like I said, I'm looking at flights that go from London Heathrow to Mumbai, and I want direct flights only. That's a pretty specific, query. I want to know how can I get from here to there in a straight line. I get the results, an hour later, there could be more results for me. So me sending that same request, I'm going to get an updated request coming back with the additional flights that might meet those parameters, or some of the flights that were there could be fully booked, which means depending on the kind of business use case, they may not appear anymore. So it's definitely not idempotent, but it is safe.
Okay. Right, let's fill that in. It's not letting me actually write. Here we go.
Oh, you need a check, I think it is.
Check, yeah. American.
That always throws me every time I'm looking for an emoji for that.
At least I've got one to cut and paste for the next ones now.
Exactly.
So, should the client send a representation?
What do you mean?
Do we need to send any body content with the request?
No.
Okay.
I mean, typically a get request, you don't send any. You don't send a body. You want to be using those query parameters very heavily.
All right. Will the server send a representation? Will there be any response content? I think that one's pretty obvious, isn't it? It's the whole point of sending the request in the first place. I would
say always, but not always. It will send a body, but that body could be empty.
Okay. So what should the resource identifier look like? Let's use the flights API as an example.
Yeah.
You want to get back a collection of flights. What should this look like?
It should be something like, depends if it's a standalone API, then you don't need to worry about kind of // API or anything like that. You just go /version number /flights. You want to pluralize the resource. on the URI. So you always want like flights, seats, destinations. It's always got to be that pluralized version. It's part of the
Okay.
REST basics, basically, right?
Plural nouns, we'll say.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Although I have seen a huge uptick recently of more behavior driven APIs. So a perfect example would be ChatGPT or any AI basically is typically the way you interact with that over an API is that you're asking it to do things. So it's very action based over RESTful resource oriented. So it's a slightly different API, but I have seen more and more APIs starting to go down this route, which is interesting.
And are we there really talking about like different types of it? We're not we're getting into like your likes of maybe GraphQL and stuff, are we? Or are we still talking about REST?
Still talk about REST, still 100% REST APIs.
Right.
They just, they have action-based URI patterns. So, for example, in typical REST, you would post to flights to create a new flight.
Yep.
But how about when you book a flight? Would you post to flights / the ID that you want to book? Or, how is the best way to do that? It all bases back to what your business needs are. If that API is, and this is kind of part of what my talk at Laracon EU last year was every API has got a design and it's got a purpose. What is the purpose of this API and who is it designed for? If you're just designing a CRUD API that's for everybody, then you don't need to think too much into the design. You can just kind of create, read, update, delete on everything, throw in those kind of list endpoints, and you're good to go. But if you're building an API for a specific purpose, like your flights one, let's say it's for a mobile application where people want to be able to search and book flights, what would be the correct endpoint or URI for booking that flight? Would it be flights /identifier /book? So it's action based. Would you be doing a post to flights /identifier?
They are very good points, I suppose, when we get to that point of the course.
Yeah.
I'm probably going to go towards flights, flight number / bookings, post to that endpoint.
Yeah.
But I'll give it more thought. But everything you said there is very valid. Let's move on to the next one. What should the response code be for a success?
So this should be a 200 if it was a successful GET collection request.
Okay, perfect. Can the response be cached?
100% yes.
Okay, probably not as many for these as you like your put, patch, and deletes or anything, but any extra considerations or gotchas to consider here?
Loads. I mean, there's query parameter caching as well. So like designing your cache key around query parameters. Should you do it? Shouldn't you do it? Should you what is the right way to do this?
Yeah, when I say any gotchas or consideration, I don't mean with regard to caching specifically. I mean as like get collections as a whole, just anything.
Yes. The one thing that I'd say is always include an e-tag.
Right.
That allows the public cache, which means that if you make that request again, the server can analyze that e-tag and see if it's changed and whether it needs to send you that full response back again, or whether it needs to do any, do I need to do back-end processing to refetch that data, or is it going to be the same thing, basically? And a lot of frameworks have kind of middleware for this already built in. But from what I believe, your course is using Slim PHP.
Yep, Slim PHP, and I am using middleware in that, and Yeah, I'll be using middleware to figure out quite a lot of the caching stuff and
Yeah.
quite a lot of the stuff. Actually, I'll be leaning on middleware quite heavily, I imagine.
To be
But
honest, most of the work that you do when you're building APIs is middleware focused. Like once you've got the basic, this is how my API looks, and this is what the data looks like, and this is how it all needs to kind of work together. You then work on that middleware layer for the biggest part of your job. It's, you know, authentication, authorization, cache strategies, you
yeah,
know, cache busting,
headers.
and then you know you can start to look into different limitations of different user types and how they might want that data coming back, and you know, middleware. It's all
Okay.
about middleware.
It's all about the middleware, mate. Let's have a look how I did. We'll go and mark my homework now. So I'll go over to Postman. What we're going to do here is fire off a get request for a collection, and we're going to check that I've got all of those things right. Okay, so my status is 200. I'm getting back a collection of flights. Headers, as far as
Nice.
caching, I did actually put some headers in here regarding this one, just as a token
Nice.
gesture to prove that this can be cached, just for demo purposes. What
Yep.
else is on the list?
You got connection keep alive, which is always good. Chunks
Right.
transfer encoding, which is nice to see. And I noticed you're also gzipping.
Yeah, I think a lot of this,
gzip responses.
a lot of this has actually already been done for me by default. Accept encoding. Yeah, I think these are Postman defaults. A lot of these. The only header that I create there that I'm sending is application JSON. I think I can't remember setting gzip, but I will definitely check that. And so the flights endpoint I use the same as what you suggested.
Yep.
Is it safe? There's nothing being changed on the database there or on the resource. So these are all stored in the databases as resources. Nothing has changed there. So I think we're good.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on to the next one. So as for what it does, I'll fill that in later on. So I'll share this document with all my mailing list subscribers, and I'll probably post it out on socials as well. And so these bits as to what it does, because they're quite long explanations, I will add those later on. Right, get item. So take it away, Steve.
This is basically where you're saying, okay, so I got a collection and you're giving me all of the available options. Hopefully your API is built and the responses are designed in a way that is discoverable. So from there you can discover how to fetch each singular flight. So what the get item will do is return specific information based on the flight that you're requesting. So I want information about flight number 1, or I want information about flight where the flight number is EF1234, for example. It allows you to request a very a singular resource that has been stored.
All right. That sounds good to me. I like that last sentence there. I think I'll use that one. Okay. Is it idempotent?
That is a very tricky question, if you ask me. Technically, no, but it does meet some of the requirements for idempotency. So it's not likely to change if you request it again, but you're not going to get the same request, the same response if it's deleted, for example.
Yeah. That's a tricky one, but I mean that's similar to the thing with. I mean, we'll come on to delete soon, because there is like you hear this debate over whether delete's idempotent, but if you're making if I make a request for if I try to delete a resource which isn't there, and I do that again, then you're performing the same action and getting the same result. If you, the thing with delete is that resource will only be there once, and once you've deleted it, it won't be there anymore. So if it was possible to, so that's where idempotency gets tricky with delete. All right. So what are we going to say for this one?
So I'd say no, it's not idempotent, because you're not asking the server to do anything that could potentially change the state. So it can be affected by outside variables.
All right. Is it safe?
Yeah, I don't see any problem with sending a GET request.
Does the client need to send a representation?
Nope. Nothing at all.
Should the server return a representation? That's pretty obvious.
Definitely.
All right. How about for URI? What should that look like?
So again, this should be flight / some form of identifier. Ideally, it wouldn't be some sort of sequential identifier, but it would be an identifier, whether that be a UUID, ULID, a slug, some custom thing, a hash ID, what might be that identifies that specific resource within your system.
Okay. Well, ideally not auto incrementing, yeah?
Yeah, the biggest problem with like auto incrementing, or I call them sequential IDs, because they're not always auto incrementing. Sometimes they're manually set, but the problem is that a potential hacker could guess that sequence, and they could start manipulating or interrogating your data if you're not careful. And while that might not always be a bad thing, it's a good practice not to leave any breadcrumbs, because once they see that that's sequential, they'll start to dig into other areas, and it's just a kind of a signpost saying, oh yeah, we didn't think about that, so what else didn't they think about?
Right, good stuff. What response code should be used for success?
Should be 200.
Can the response be cached?
100% yes. 100% cache away. Because if you're asking for that same resource, you want to heavily cache that response and that data itself, and then have a good caching strategy to bust it.
All right. Anything that you'd consider for a request for an item resource as opposed to a collection, or are they roughly doing similar things except with different data, returning different data? What would you say?
They're kind of doing similar things. So again, you want to include e-tags. And what I didn't mention on the GET collection, which I thought about when we started talking about getting items, is like if you follow something like JSON API and you start including additional relationships and additional data from kind of sub resources and sideloading that information into the request, then you've got to think about that sort of stuff, because that massively affects your caching strategy. That's the biggest gotcha, I'd say, is e-tags and kind of what do people call them? I think they call it like side loading stuff, or there's so many different names that people call it these days.
We're going to go with side loading stuff for now, and we're going to call it something else when we think of a better name. Right. So, and would you include side loading stuff in the get items as well?
100%. Yeah. Imagine like a mobile interface, and you've the app itself is gone. Okay, so you've clicked on that flight, which means you're going to want to get this flight information. I'm going to send that request, but this screen on your mobile app is also going to get additional information about that or is going to want to know more and display more. So it might go, okay, so for this flight, what options are there? What available upgrades are there? It's going to get a few different things that are kind of related to that data.
Yep.
To then also show. So again, it always depends on what the API is being used for, but it's always a consideration.
Definitely. All right. Let's go over and mark my homework. So going to make a request to a single item endpoint. So here I'm using environment variables in Postman. So here where I'm putting the number
Nice.
in the curly brackets, if you're like wondering what that is, I'm in a pre-request script in Postman. We are going to cover Postman in depth in the course. So don't worry if none of this is stuff that you've seen before, but we will definitely be covering it. So I've set an environment variable for a single flight. We're going to fire off this, and this is what I get back. And here's a little tip which I stole from you, Steve, on nesting single items. So I've been using it ever since.
It's handy, isn't it?
I love it. Yeah, I love it. Yeah. Yep. I mean, I've not seen millions of APIs that do it, but I still think it's a really good idea. So I'm going to stick with it until someone tells me otherwise. But yeah, I like it. 200 OK response. And again, the headers, I didn't set any caching on this one, but the content can be cached. We've established that.
Yeah.
We're not going to make any changes to resources on the server. And so, yeah, this is totally safe. All right.
And you didn't use a sequential ID, so I'm happy.
Yeah, and that was one of the considerations. So at first I started off with stuff like this, but then then I had to think, well, that it doesn't take into account, I could have that number, and then it could be that number for like different days and things like that. So to make it more specific to a individual single flight, because that's more like a sort of flight identifier, even though everyone calls it a flight number. Yeah. And so to make it actually relating to one flight on one day, I had to tag the date on there. It's just it's one of those things where we've not come to the design and documentation part of the course yet. So I'm just throwing stuff down and then realizing after I broadcast it to the world and shared it with everyone, that's really sucks. So
oh, I wish I could change that now. Yeah, no, I completely, I like that. I think, the way that you've designed that identifier is that, the JF, for example, is the airline. The 1001 is the flight path, and then dash date that it's flying on. So it's like on British Airways, flying from Heathrow to Mumbai on this date. Is super specific and cannot, you can kind of parse and analyze that really well. And if you're doing aggregate queries, you could really, you could start to group and break that information up really nicely.
Right. Thanks a lot. Yeah, the JF, by the way, there's a little play on words. It's my new airline, which I created for the course, JetFoo. So it's a play on JetFoo. Except the cabin crew, if you mess with them, they will kick your ass because they know Kung Fu. Right, then, let's move on to post, I think.
Yes.
Right, then.
Oh, my favorite.
All right. This should be good. Tell us what it does then.
It creates a resource on your server. It's you saying, I have this data and I want you to keep this data and do any potential actions with it. So in your scenario, you would post to flights to create a new flight, or you might post to flight/number to create a booking, for example.
Okay, idempotent.
Yeah, it should be idempotent.
Should be idempotent. Quick reminder for anyone who joined late. So idempotency means that a client can make the same call repeatedly while producing the same result. So in other words, making multiple identical requests has the same effect as making a single request. Okay, so if you post the same data, You're going to actually create another record, aren't you?
It should be idempotent. It's not always idempotent. So this is where you get into the two different schools of thought with APIs. Is if you're going to send me the same data twice, then you're stupid. But then you've got the other school of thought on, okay, I'm going to start using the idempotency key header, so that if you do send me that request again, let's say you accidentally double click the button or a network glitch caused it to send twice, then I'm going to treat them as the same request, basically. I actually wrote about this recently in PHP Architect, because I write for those. I wrote about idempotency keys in my latest article that's coming out next month or this month.
All right. Yeah, make sure you give us a link to that then, and I'll share it with the folks that are watching. So what we're going to go with, we're going to say no for idempotency, safe. I think it's what we're going to go with for safe.
It's not safe. It's always post requests are, your API is taking data from an outside source and going to do something with it. Somewhere state will change, whether that's in an email log or in your database, in your cache, something somewhere to do with the state of your application will change.
All right. Should the client send a representation?
It should do, but it doesn't always need to.
Okay. Well, we'll just, in the case of this flights API, I think we can safely say that it'd be very hard to create a flight without actually sending any information about it.
Exactly. So, in the context of this flights API, 100% yes.
Should the server return a representation?
Oh, this is where we get into another discussion. It depends. So, if that flight is created straight away,
right,
then it should return the resource that you just created. If it's going to be created in the background, then it might not give you any body data back, or it might just have a simple message.
Okay. So what I'm going to put here is tick if created straight away, because that's basically what I'm doing with mine. I'm not creating anything in the background, but of course I'm going to leave that bit in there which says it depends. Yeah. And like a lot of things in software development,
it really depends. Right? It depends on what the expected behavior or the designed behavior is.
All right, perfect. What response code should be used for success? So I've just made a post request to this flights endpoint. Very first time. What response code should I? A success response code I should add. Should I get?
So this is you taking that flight data and you're creating that flight straight away.
Mm-hmm.
That's a 201. That is, I have HTTP created that resource that you asked me to.
All right. Can the response be cached?
No. The response shouldn't be cached, but the data can be.
Yep. Okay, yeah, because all we're doing here is we're creating a resource. We're not retrieving data. So for sending a post request, typically you won't cache the response, even if it does send a response.
Yeah, it does send a response, but the next time they send a post request is most likely because they're creating another flight.
Correct. So it wouldn't make sense to cache this, would it?
No.
Right. Any considerations or gotchas outside of what we've discussed for when you create a resource?
The only gotcha is the idempotency key, really. It's opinionated, super opinionated.
Hmm.
Things like financial transactions will always have an idempotency key.
Right.
Because if they double click a button, they don't want to be charged twice by accident.
Where would the idempotency key go? Was it something you put in the headers, or where
yes,
would
a header. It's idempotency key header, and what it does is the server will accept it, and you've got to kind of, it's middleware that you've got to add. But the way that I add it typically is when that request comes in, I do a cache lookup on the idempotency key, and if it doesn't exist, then I will create my resource and then cache the entire response with that key. Then if it's double clicked, or if there's a network blip, or that same request comes through within a specific time period, I do the lookup, and if that key is now there, I just return that response straight away in the middleware, so that I don't have to pretend to recreate it, or I don't have to do anything. It's just, you've given me this data before. Here's the response back in case you didn't get it or something happened, but here's the exact same response back.
That makes sense. All
it's
right.
a little bit like a cross-site request forgery token. It's very similar in its behavior. I'm sending a request at this point in time with this payload. Here's my idempotency key. Send it over. Server can then say, you've literally just sent me that. Here's the response I did give you. Or it says, okay, it's the first time I'm seeing this data. Let me save it, and I'll store it in case someone else sends the exact same thing within the next 15 minutes, for example.
All right. Okay, let's go and check my homework then. Here we go. So I have a post request. I've created some body here. No, have I? Is that my response? That's a response from my practice run. Here we go. So I have so here we need to actually send some data to the server because we want to create this resource. And so with the GET request, we didn't need to send a body with those. So you'll notice that we didn't have a body with those. But for this, we're obviously going to need to pass this information to the server. So let's fire this off. You'll notice I've got the flights endpoint exactly how Steve described this. So fire this off now. And we have created a resource by the looks of things. I'll go and refresh.
And you've got a 201 created response back.
I've got a 201. We have created a resource, and we have returned some response content which shows the resource as we have created it, which I think that's useful info. You know, a lot of APIs might not return a representation of the resource which you've just created, but I prefer ones that do. You're just getting some feedback on what you've actually created, you know.
Because I mean, if you look at kind of modern applications, they've got quite a complicated application state when they use an API. So they capture that data and they send it to your API. You store it, you send them a response back. They can then take that response data that you gave them for this flight and update their internal state so that we don't then have to then fetch the data for that flight. Because the problem is that I go to the index route and list all flights. I then say post. I create that new flight. You give me that data back, and I get redirected from my application to the / route. I could kind of append that flight information to the flight information I've already got, or I could just do another GET request to get all of the flight information. So I'm having to make another request when the only change has been the one that I've done. So,
right.
Yeah, I had a very big conversation about that at Laracon as well. So it's very, very interesting topic.
All right. And this was a talk you did at Laracon. Is that what we're talking about? Or just
I gave a talk at Laracon last year. But this was a conversation. I think it was over coffee or food or something.
Right, fair enough. Fair enough. One thing I'm going to mention here while I remember is you talked about like links to related content in the
Yep.
previous one, and it also triggered my memory while you were just talking about that stuff. I am going to cover different types of API and hypermedia and HAL and stuff like that in the course, in which case what I will also do is I'll include things like pagination links and also links to related content. So, for example, if you sent a GET request for a collection of flights, then you might have links for pagination. You also might have links to other useful things like how to book flights, maybe bookings endpoints and things like that. So if you're wondering where's my hypermedia and thinking this sucks, it's because I've not done it yet, but we are going to cover it in the course. Right, let's move on.
Actually, I've actually started building a package for kind of negotiable hypermedia stuff.
Right.
Started building it last night, and it's interesting so far.
I'm looking forward to seeing it.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping to write an article or do a video on it once it's done.
And is this like a PHP package, something I can pull into this, or is it?
No, it's a Laravel one because I didn't want to juggle the different types of response and request. I mean, I suppose I could kind of strip it back to just dealing with arrays and transforming arrays and then make it more agnostic. But
I don't want to create any work for you, mate.
we'll see. I mean, so far, all I've dealt with is arrays and the adapter pattern.
Right.
Literally all I've dealt with so far.
Yeah, good luck finishing that off. I very rarely get into building little libraries and packages anymore, just because of the nature of. But building courses and things takes up your entire life. So once you get into start building courses, you end up not doing that kind of stuff as much. But
I haven't done a course yet.
So it's a very good reason not to. Right. Okay, we're on to your favorite.
Yes.
Delete. What does a delete operation do?
It removes the resource from your server, whether that's hard removal, as in full deletion, or it marks it as soft deleted, depending on your business logic. You might want to soft delete and have a cooldown period, or you might want to hard delete because you want to do lots of kind of cascading cleanup in your database.
Right. So a soft delete would be the record still stays on your system. It's still in the database, but you've marked it with the timestamp as like a date.
Yeah, it was deleted at this point, basically.
Yeah. Whereas like a hard delete will be you've completely removed it forever.
Yeah, that row's disappeared and there's no getting that back.
Alrighty.
Unless you use event sourcing, in which case maybe you could replay up to a point.
Yeah, I'm not sure my audience is ready for event sourcing yet, but maybe one day.
I don't think I'm ready for event sourcing, and I've built things with it before. So
yeah. I get asked about things like that quite a lot. Can you teach us event sourcing and CQRS? I'm like, I could do, but I'd have to learn it myself first. So
I've got a few things on YouTube. I'll send you some links.
Yeah, Sean McCall sent me some pretty cool stuff, which I'm going to look at.
He has got some fantastic stuff. Was it Event Sorcery that he created? The course.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. That was super useful.
Yeah, he knows his stuff. He's way out of my league. He's
likewise.
Yeah. Right. Delete. Is it idempotent?
No.
Clients can make the same call repeatedly while producing the same result. In other words, making multiple identical requests, same effect as making a single request. We're going to say no, but I'm going to get you to explain why.
As with the post, if you've got the idempotency key, it should be idempotent. But in your scenario with the flights, it wouldn't be.
Okay. So if I delete a flight, so if I delete flight 1, 2, 3, 4, or I send a request to delete flight 1, 2, 3, 4, then if I make another request to delete 1, 2, 3, 4, I won't get the same result.
No, you should get a 404 the second time.
All right. And so, yeah, this was the thing I was talking about before. Idempotency on deletes. It's quite has been a hot topic, and people have debated it. So the way I've always seen it in my head is, you kind of, if you're making a delete request for a resource which isn't there, yeah, then that's the same as I'm confusing myself now, but I've always thought of this as being idempotent, if I'm honest, but yeah,
I'd
because
say,
if you're making a request, I think there's a difference between making a request for a resource which is there and one which isn't. But are they the same request if the resource exists, kind of thing? But
no,
maybe
because
I'm
your server state is at a different position depending on the request, right? It's either there or it's not. And if I send a delete request to delete a resource that is there, I should get a response saying that I've deleted it. If I send a request to delete a resource that doesn't exist, I should get a status that tells me that that doesn't exist. So once I've deleted it, it no longer exists, even if it's soft deleted. So I should then change that state. That is kind of my approach to it anyway.
All right. Okay, I'm going to take your answer for that. Is it safe? I'd say
No.
definitely not. Yeah.
It's probably one of the most unsafe ones.
Should the client send a representation?
Personally, no. Some
No.
APIs do. So,
right.
Oh no, sorry, other way around. No, you shouldn't send a representation. I'm on about the server. Ignore me. Ignore me. I've not had enough coffee today.
Oh, that's all right. Yeah, no, because all you need to do, I guess, would be just make a delete request to the endpoint, which includes the flight number in our case, and that'll be enough information for the server to know what it needs to delete.
Yeah.
Should the server return a representation? So I think you were getting a bit ahead of yourself, Stephen. This was what you were thinking
I
about.
always do.
That's
Personally, I don't think they should. I've seen APIs that will send you like a representation of the resource that you just deleted.
Yeah.
But if you think of it logically, they're sending you a representation of a resource that doesn't exist. So why would they send it?
Yeah, it's a bit of a weird thing to do, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so what should the resource identifier look like? What should the URI look like for
/flights/identifier?
All right, so we're looking at the same kind of identifier as to get a item, yeah. Perfect. All right, response code for a delete.
So if it's deleted straight away, then it should be. This is where people argue. So there's a few responses that you could return here. You could return a 202 that we accepted your delete request, or you could return a 204 because you've got nothing to give them back. You've got no response. It's a no content response.
All right. So what are we going between there? Did you say 202 and a 204?
Yeah.
Just remind me what 202 is again.
Accepted.
Accepted. All right. So 202 accepted, 204 no content. Can the response be cached? I think it's pretty safe to say there'd be nothing to cache.
Yeah, exactly.
Considerations or gotchas? What kind of thing would we need to think about, if anything, regarding delete?
Authorization is the only thing you need to think about with delete requests.
That's a very good one. Yeah, because like we said, it's not considered a safe. It's about the most unsafe thing you can do. So authorization, any kind of protection you can put in there to make sure, do you really want to delete this kind of thing? And that
Is this person allowed to delete this resource? Basically, that's a key thing. Because I mean, you're going to be authenticating across the board for your API, but you also want to then, on top of authenticating, you want to authorize, can this person create this, or can this person delete that? It's, otherwise people just get a little bit happy and start deleting things while testing sequential IDs.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. All right, let's check my homework. So we've gone with that's the endpoint flights and the identifier. We're going with 202 or 204. Does the client need to send a representation? We said no. Should the server return a representation? We said no. I'm afraid I've not actually worked authorization into my API yet, because that will be coming up in like let's have a look. Security, so that's going to be like section 7, so I'm way off that. But let's go and see how we did here. So we're going to delete. So I've gone with flights and the identifier, like you said. Again, I'm using a environment variable. And so let's go and fire this off. I'm just going to check that I have that number 16 in my database first. Should do, because it's the last one that I just created. Let's have a look. There we go. So I'm hoping to see this disappear now. So I'm doing a hard delete. This isn't a soft delete in this case. Let's fire off this. All right. So we've fired that off. We got a 204 no content, which is one of the two which you mentioned. I didn't send a request body. You'll see here there is no response body. So I think I've scored full marks there. Would you say?
I would say, full marks. Before we score you full marks on that one, what happens if you send it again?
Perfect question. There we go. So we got 404 not found, because I actually remembered to add it. A little caveat, I forgot to do this on put and patch, but I did remember to add it to delete, because when I was creating it, I was thinking a lot about idempotency and what would idempotency actually mean in this scenario. So delete. There's no response body and no request body. We're going to the same endpoint. The only difference is it's tried to delete a resource which didn't exist, and so the server is returning a 404 not found. All right. Let's move on to the next one. So this is where stuff gets really
two, which is the cause of many arguments.
Right. This is where whatever happens, Steve, we're going to stay friends.
We'll still be friends. Don't worry.
Right. Put. Tell us what. Describe put as best you can.
So put is an update request, but what you're doing with a put request is that you're putting a lot of data in the database. So let's say you're taking your flight, you've got a number, origin, destination, and you've got times of when it takes off and when it lands. If you need to update more than one thing, you'll be doing a put request, because you're putting new data into the database.
Okay.
You're patching a singular bit of data. You're patching the flight number. You're not putting the new flight number. You're putting new flight information, but you're patching a bit of information that was incorrect. So that's the way that I typically differentiate those two.
All right. So to help people understand, would it be fair to say if we were making a put request to this flights API, we would be updating all of the data for a flight, apart from maybe something like obviously the primary key in the database, whatever, but all of the rest of the data?
Yeah, you'd want to be putting a whole lot of new information in.
All right. Could you describe it as replacing?
I'd probably say that it's a full update.
Right.
So you got put as a full update and patch as a partial update, right?
I like that.
It's probably
Full
the easiest
of
way to kind of name those things.
resource. Full update of resource data.
Yeah.
Nice. Idempotent.
Again, for your scenario, it is idempotent in effect, because if you send the same request, you're updating the data to the exact same thing. There's no issues there of creating another resource, for example, like you would with Post, or removing a resource that doesn't exist. So I would say that put is definitely idempotent.
Okay, I'd agree with that. Is it safe?
No.
Okay, so it's not safe because we are actually making a change on the server, aren't we? So
Yeah, exactly.
a safe request doesn't make any changes on the server, whereas obviously we are making changes here. Should the client send a representation?
Yeah, you should be sending the data that you want changed, basically. Whether that's with a put request, it should be more than one field. Typically, what you'll see is with a put request, they send the whole resource as a payload, whereas with a patch request, it would just be key and value. With a put request, you should be sending kind of that representation back and saying, this is what I want that representation to look like.
All right. Should the server return a representation?
Yes.
Okay,
It should be returning the resource reflecting the changes that you've requested.
I like that. What should the resource identifier look like?
Exactly the same as before, flight identifier, because you want to identify that specific resource with that payload and say, take this resource, make it look like that.
That sounds good. Okay, response code.
202. We've accepted your changes, basically.
Okay. I think that could be the first one I've got wrong.
It is usually the first one that goes wrong.
Right. Okay. Can the response be cached?
No.
We're not going to cache the response for this. Considerations or gotchas?
Again, like before, authorization.
Yeah, because you don't want random maniacs updating stuff.
Updating flight information, right?
Yeah.
The last thing you want.
Oh, all right. So let's go and fire off this bad boy. So into put. Okay, so as you can see here, like Steve said, we're updating all of the data on a resource. So we're looking at this flight number here, beginning with JF1001. So if we go and look at that in the database, we can see the origin is ABC, the destination is DEF. Here are the departure times. The change that I'm making is subtle, but it should be one which you can easily see that I'm making a change here. So I'm changing the destination to XXX. If that is a real airport, I'd be very impressed. So, and like we said, the endpoint is the same as what we used for things like get item, delete. Yep. All right.
You're dealing with a singular resource, no matter what action you might be doing on it.
Perfect. Let's fire this off and see how we get on. Okay, so we'll fire that on.
Gave me a 200.
You'll notice the status code I went with was 200. It's telling me this is the returned representation of the resource. The destination is XXX. Let's just check that in the database, refresh, so we can see we have updated a record in the database, but we sent all of the data in order to do that. Yeah, so I think all right, except for the status code. Are there any
nothing wrong with the 200? Okay.
Yeah.
The 202 is just me being picky.
Right.
I'm well known for being picky about certain things, and status codes is one of them.
All right. So technically, if you're saying that's okay, I've still not got any wrong.
No, 200 is okay. Yeah.
But 202 is preferable because it conveys more meaning, you think? Or
Yeah, it's, the 200 response, you're saying, okay, thank you, I've got that. It's okay, I've got the data, here you go. 202 is going, okay, we've accepted that change, or we've accepted what you want us to do.
all right. Great stuff. So now we are on to patch. I've seen the comment in there, Jambo Neo, saying I'm going to be that guy that said that the example should have been patched. I only changed the destination. There are some APIs actually which they don't even use patch, isn't there? There's some APIs that only do put. So even if you want to change just one thing, you've still got to send like full.
It massively depends on like the UI. If you've got inline editing on a form, for example, then you're probably going to be doing lots of patch requests. But if you've got one form that's got a submit button at the bottom, then it's more likely that you're going to be doing a put request, because you're going to take that data and put that update into state. You're not patching columns, you're putting updates.
Yeah. And for a long time, people just didn't use patch, or it wasn't like a first-class citizen like put was in HTTP for quite a while. Is that correct?
I believe so, yeah.
All right, let's move on to patch. So let's talk about what patch actually does. So instead of doing a full update of resource, we are doing a partial update of a resource.
Cool. So I've got a son coming to say hi.
All right, let's all say hello to Steve's son. Welcome to the show.
Oh, hello, you're buddy. On YouTube. Fly. Here we go. Can you say hi?
Hi.
You're on YouTube.
You're live to 8 million people. What would you like to say?
It's my dad.
I'm your dad, aren't I?
Yes.
It's my dad.
I am your dad.
Hello, your dad. Right. Okay.
My name is Sly.
It is Sly.
What's this lad's name?
Sylvester Sly.
Sylvester is patch. Should patch be idempotent?
Steve.
I am Steve, aren't I?
Water.
And you have water. What are you doing? Were you done with your YouTube upstairs?
Yeah.
Okay. You sit here and you can be quiet, okay? You can watch yourself later.
All right then. Patch is patch idempotent.
I know what.
No, patch isn't idempotent. Patch is kind of okay. Like in your kind of example, I'd probably say patch is idempotent actually, because what you're doing is you're saying, I want to change the flight number to this.
We can also drink water.
We can drink water, yeah. So if you give that same payload a second time, it might not perform any action because it is the same thing, but it'll give you that same response back. So I would say it is idempotent.
That's how I think about it. If I update a destination multiple times,
I'm
going to get the same result back, aren't I? I'm only going to have updated that destination. All right, we'll stick that down as a check. Is it safe?
No, just like a general update, it's not safe. Yeah, that could be an email address update, or it could be a password update. It's not a safe action.
All right. Yeah, we're making a change on the server. It's not safe. Does the client need to send a representation?
100%. You should be telling it exactly the field that you want to change on that resource.
Okay, the specific. And of course, you can change more than one field for a patch. We're clear on that, but Yes, we're saying we're not doing a full update, but we can do a partial update. But you can do like a partial update using 2 or 3 fields. It doesn't just have to be one. Should the server return a representation?
Yep, it should, just like with a put, you should be returning the new state. You should be saying, okay, so this is the new state of the resource after your request.
Okay, and we want to see that full representation. Yeah, the full
Yeah.
flight in our case.
I don't know what it's about though.
It's okay,
What
buddy.
should the resource identifier look like?
Come in, mummy. Can you say bye?
Bye.
You
Thanks
wave.
for coming.
Bye bye.
Good job. You can watch yourself on YouTube later.
Just wonder where he's gone.
All right.
So yeah, again, it should look, the URI should look the same as a put request. The only change is the behavior. You're saying, I want to update all of it, or I want to update just this bit.
Okay. Response code.
Again, I would do 202 or 200. You know, okay, changes have been reflected. Ideally, it should be 202. We've accepted that change.
All right. Either 202
Yeah.
Accepted or 200 for success. Can the response be cached?
No, you shouldn't be caching any sort of kind of behavioral action, whether that's creation, updates, or deleting.
Okay. What action did you call those then? What name did you give to that?
I call them creation or behavioral actions.
Behavioral
Like
action.
you're asking the API to behave in a certain way. Whereas a GET request, it's a retrieval action. You're requesting information. You're not asking the server to do anything. You're just saying, please give me this.
That makes perfect sense.
I mean, it's a phrase I've completely coined myself. It might not be an accurate name, but it's what works for me.
Yeah. I mean, it's a bit similar to commands and queries, isn't it? Where it's like your gets are like your query operations, and you could call your puts, deletes, posts, maybe command operations.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So considerations or gotchas.
Again, authentication and authorization. It's always, can this person do that when it comes to any behavioral action?
Yeah. Right. Let's go and see how I did. Patch. So the one thing, yeah. So for put and patch, like I say, I forgot to actually do the thing where I'm trying to update a resource which isn't there. Totally forgot about that. It was just one of them weekends. But here we're looking at flight 1000 and pre-request script 1001, which is the one which we just updated to XXX. And so my patch is basically changing that back, really. So this is what we're doing. Like Steve said, this is now just a partial update. We're only sending some of the data, just specifically the data which we want to update. And let's go and fire this off. The flights, like we said, we're using the same endpoint, same URI. I think we've covered everything there. Let's hit this. Okay. And so again, 200. But this is the response representation. As you can see, the destination is now DEF again. And so, yeah, I mean, I totally agree. For put and patch, even if you're for a patch, you're just updating one field, it's good to see the full representation and what it currently looks like in the response. And yeah, and we'll just check the database to make sure that went through. So at the top there, we've changed that back to DEF. Right, ripping through these now. So
nice.
I think we've got all the nasty ones out of the way there, haven't we?
Yeah, now you've got the interesting ones. They're less commonly used.
Less commonly used. And so I think that's why it's good to include them, because a lot of developers have probably looked at hidden options, and especially if they're just starting out, they won't actually, because they won't use them.
Most people will know options, but less familiar with head.
Fair enough. I'll let you take it away.
So a head request is, you're basically requesting metadata, is this resource, does it exist? What sort of content should I expect? It's a little bit like in your HTML, if you preload, you're creating that connection directly to that URI, and you're saying, am I going to get a 200 if I send a GET request to this? Basically, you're saying, is this a valid resource and a resource identifier? What sort of content should I expect? When was it last modified? It's your client's way of just kind of reducing bandwidth, because if that doesn't exist, it'll just not send the GET request. It'll just bail out early.
All right. And so, yeah, I suppose we'd end up with the same result as what you've just described there. I've always thought about it as it's like if you send a GET request, it's just going to, instead of sending you the content back, it's just going to send you back the headers, which will prove that this resource does actually exist, which you asked for.
Yeah, exactly.
You're just getting the headers without the content.
It's like a sanity check, right? It's like when you double check your code. That's kind of the head request. You're sanity checking a URI. You're saying, okay, does this exist? What should I expect if I send a request to this endpoint?
That look good. Sanity check sends just headers if it exists. That's what.
Yep.
All right. Idempotent. This is
it should be idempotent. Other than perhaps if you include things like last modified at cache headers, then it won't be idempotent because it could update in between. But in theory, you should be you should get minimum things that should always act the same. The only differentiator will be cache.
All right. So by default, we're saying that is an idempotent operation.
Yeah.
Safe.
Yeah. Safe as houses, as they say up north in the UK.
Yep. I'm sort of in the north. I'm in Cheshire, just south of Manchester. What's that?
It's north enough.
North enough. Yeah, north enough. Should the client send a representation?
Nope.
No representation. And then one of the main things about this, should the service return a representation?
Not at all.
No representation. So, like I said, similar to sending the GET request, except you're not getting that body content back. And the identifier, well, I suppose it depends what you're requesting, but
it should just look like a URI at the end of the day.
Yep.
Sequential or just singular. If I do a GET request to flight spelt wrong, the head request is going to fail and give me a different response to what spelling it correct would.
Yep. Response code?
You should just get 200 from that.
Just 200?
If you're getting things correct, you should get that 200.
Alrighty. And can the response be cached? Is there any point?
Yeah, 100%. Like in a large application, you don't want to send multiple head requests to the same URI unless there's a reason to do so. Like you're polling the existence of something, maybe.
Okay. So we've sent a head request to check that resource exists. We've got our result back. We might as well just keep that and cache that, and then we don't need to keep.
Yeah, exactly. You can manage the cache busting both client and server side at that point. So if you perform a delete action from your client side, you can bust the cache client side and then allow the server to do their cache busting their side. But obviously, you're getting technical there, right?
Extra considerations?
None.
Nah, I couldn't think of any. Right, let's go see how
authentication. That's about it. Head requests should still be authenticated. Otherwise, as a potential attacker, I can check for the existence of things against your API as much as I want until I find something that could be a potential target. Because if I'm just getting 404s, I'm going to keep going till I find that 200 response. Whereas if I'm getting a 403 or a 401, then I'm like, okay, so they're blocking access just from kind of interrogation perspective.
All right. And so, yeah, this leads me on to something which is quite interesting, I guess. So you've got an API, it's quite harmless. You're not giving away any state secrets or anything like that. Should all APIs be authenticated?
Yes.
Okay.
Always authenticate your API. Even if it's a read-only API that is just providing information, you should still authenticate because it gives you the opportunity to block bad actors quickly.
Yeah. And people who might try and take you down with like a DDoS or stuff like
exactly.
that.
All APIs should be authenticated and rate limited as a golden rule.
All right. I think I'll put that in there just so that we remember it, even though it applies to all of these. Everything.
Yeah.
Authenticate your API. Just do it. Right. Yeah. Okay. Let's go and send a head request. So here we are. As you can see, I'm not sending anybody. We're just sending it to this flights endpoint. We're seeing, do we have a resource here? Remember, a resource can be a collection of items as well as singular items. And on the left here, you see this is a head request. Let's fire this off. Okay, so you'll see here, we're not getting any body back. However, we did get our headers. And that is proving that that resource did exist. And we've also got the caching information there, just like we had for the GET request. And the interesting thing about this is I didn't actually set up an endpoint or any handlers or any controllers or anything like this. And so the reason why all this cache control and all the headers are exactly the same when we get this response as what we get for the flights is that Slim is just knows that what it needs to do is send back only the headers for what will be a GET request to that endpoint. So that's exactly how it works, really.
It's just checking, from Slim's perspective, does my root collector contain this? Yeah, you're good to go. I don't need to go further.
Perfect. All right, let's go on to the last one. So options. I'll let you explain what this one does.
Options. So most people would have seen an options request in their, most likely in their console log, where it says, options requests failed pre-flight, for example, and that's cross-resource origin sharing, making requests to other APIs or to an API that isn't on the same domain. And what will happen is it just checks to see, can I make a request to this? What head will do, it will say, will I get the response I want from this? Does it exist? And options is, am I set up to talk to you? Can I talk to you? Have you got any rules around you only accept requests from this endpoint or from this source, this kind of one point? And that's where options comes in. It's that kind of pre-flight checks. Head, yes, it exists. Now, can I actually make that request? And usually it's on behavioral endpoints. You won't see it so much on GET requests, but you'll see it more on like a post, delete, put, or patch where you're going to be sending information. Are you configured to talk to me?
All right, that makes sense. So, yeah, so what we're saying is on the kind of things where you might be making changes or retrieving things, updating things, deleting things. You're asking what are the rules? Would that be fair?
Basically, yeah, you're saying, am I allowed to send you requests? It's the HTTP version of authorization, I'd say.
Okay, idempotent. This might be tricky.
That is one I'm not 100% sure on. I would say that it is idempotent because you're either configured to actually talk to that API or you're not. The only way that that would change is if you change your request.
All right, sounds like it's safe to me.
Yeah, I'd say it's
We're
safe.
not making any changes. Think we can take that for granted. Should the client send a representation?
Nope. Headers are enough.
Headers are enough. Is the server expected to return any representation?
Nope. No, nobody. No, nothing. Just headers.
Nobody, just
Headers
headers.
are the status code. That's how we like it.
Header status code, and it's to whatever URI you want the information for.
Yep. Wherever you're basically sending that data, and you should get a 200. I think.
200.
I'm not sure if it's 200 or 100. I'd say 200.
We'll go with 200.
Yeah. I could be wrong. I'm happy to be wrong.
Should we cache this? Is there any point?
I wouldn't cache it. Yeah, rules change. So you don't want to kind of cache these things just in case configuration changes. You want to make sure that you're always sending fresh data in case you're suddenly blocking requests from a specific endpoint or specific kind of source.
All right. Considerations of gotchas.
So many. Cause is like
okay.
options. Options are typically dealt with in cause. So it's usually the biggest gotcha is configuration, both client and server side. You know, have you configured it correctly to accept requests from external sources, or haven't you? Again, I believe I actually wrote about this on Laravel News this time.
All right.
Pause. Where is it? Diving into cross-resource sharing. I posted this back in June last year. I'm going to drop that in the chat.
All right.
There you go.
Drop that in there. Is it this one? Discussions too? Is that the one?
It's not coming up tonight because it's a link. If I share it with you, I can let you share it in the chat just in case it's a spam prevention thing.
All right. Okay. Right. I'll drop that in there for the folks. There's Steve's talk on cross-origin resource sharing, otherwise known as cause. A lot of people have asked me about cause actually for this course because I think it's one of those things where I think just finding quality information on the subject isn't.
It's hard. I mean, until I wrote that article, it was very much, to understand cause, you had to go to the Mozilla docs. That was the main place to go, right? It's, I'm going to go to, Mozilla and find out what cause is. So I thought, okay, let's talk about what it is in the context of Laravel and how you configure it and what the options mean.
All right. Something which you think would be well worth including in the course?
Definitely. I mean, my article is focused around Laravel, but I think there's definitely a lack of general knowledge around what cause is.
Yeah. Definitely.
So explaining what cause is to a more abstract level would be super handy.
I'm going to tell the world what cause is. I think I've got it on the content list. Let's have a quick look. Definitely got it in here somewhere, I'm sure. Cause.
Pretty sure.
The writing's so small, it's hard to pick it out here live. Never mind. But I have promised people that I'm going to put it in there, so I'm going to put it in there anyway. And I'll make sure I add it to the content. Let's go and fire off an options request.
And the cause, spelt with 2 R's, was actually a band, if you remember.
That's correct. Irish band, yeah?
Yep.
Right. Here we go. Let's fire this off. So this is what I didn't send a body. That was the endpoint. It is an options request.
What headers did you send with it?
Yeah, that's a good question. Just the default
Host.
host.
The host is
ones.
calculated when the request is sent, and that is what will be checked against the options request.
Okay. Right. Yes. So it's going to do a check and see if this host is allowed to make this request for this resource. Is that right?
Basically, yeah.
All right. And these are the headers I got back, which are quite interesting. Or the most interesting one is the one at the bottom. We have a new one, which I haven't added. It's been added automatically, sort of by Slim, I guess. What he's saying, the methods which are allowed for this endpoint are get and post. And you'll see that that's actually true. They're the ones where we can make requests to.
Whereas if you send that to flight/flight number, you would get a bigger list, other than posts, obviously.
Let's test that theory. So for a single flight, you want me to send an options request?
Yep, test an options request, and you should get more in the allow.
Right. So same method, not ignore that method not allowed. I think that's just something to do with my config, but I think you are dead right, and we do have
Get,
a lot
delete,
more. So allow, get, delete, put, and patch. Yeah. So it's basically telling you what methods are allowed for this particular endpoint.
Typically, I add the allow header on responses for all of my endpoints. Just a habit I got into. It allows it's method limiting. It's saying I allow requests on this, that, and the other. And some clients, for example, browsers or not Postman, but other things will then adhere to that, and it won't let you send, for example, a post request if that allow doesn't come back.
Right. Okay. Definitely something to bear in mind now, I think.
Yeah, 100%. It's definitely useful. I've got again, I'm pretty sure I wrote an article on it about all the different headers that you should include by default. Right.
Everything you post, I think, on socials, I just bookmark it because I was like, when I was doing the research, I was thinking, I'm sure Steve sent something out, or Treble API sent something out about this or whatever. So yeah, I just started bookmarking everything because I was, and so I've got a massive list of bookmarks in like my Google Chrome. I've read most of it, and then you get onto Treble API or Nordic APIs, and you just go down a massive rabbit hole of articles about all different things. You're thinking, you sort of get the FOMO thing of thinking, I'm definitely going to need to have this information later on in the course, and so
at some point,
bookmarked the world basically.
There definitely needs to be some sort of like AI bookmark tool where I give you this to bookmark. I might want to visit it later, but I want you to summarize it and put it somewhere that I can read it.
You should build that. You should build that this weekend.
I will build it this weekend.
Oh, right. Okay, so that's all my stuff. And what I will do, folks, is I will send this out to my mailing list, and we'll also post it on social media. We'll probably cause like a load of controversy and an absolute burn down, but who cares? It's engagement.
Exactly.
Right. And then, so I think we've decided. So I'm gonna do like a competition and a giveaway shortly. I've not thought what I'm going to give away yet or what the question is going to be. I'm going to think about that while Steve introduces some of his stuff, I think. So we've done our operations lesson. So, Steve, I'll let you take it away. Do you want to take control? Do you want to share your screen, or do you want me to just put your hackathon
open the links. There we go. So I'm actually running a hackathon as part of what I do as a day job. In the day, I work at a company called Treble. And what we do is we're kind of, think Google Analytics, but for your API. What endpoints are most commonly hit? What's the most common payload? What's the response size? How long is my API taking to respond? That's what Treble does. And there's a really generous free tier. Feel free to sign up. There's SDKs for most popular frameworks and languages. So give it a try if you fancy it. But we're running a hackathon in March. And it starts on the 3rd of March, which is World Book Day, and it's ending on the 25th of March, which is partway through spring break. So I've gone for a 3-week period so that those people with full-time jobs and families may still be able to join in, because I know what it's like when you see a hackathon online. It's like, spend the whole day doing this on a weekend, and it's like, I can't do that. I've got kids and a wife and obligations. So this is more, it's a relatively simple task, and you can spend a couple of hours a week over 3 weeks, and you could probably achieve it quite easily. So there's 8 different options of what you could build. There's a digital library API, a storytelling API, a book exchange API, literary analysis API, travel planning API, an event finder API, spring break budget planning API, and a spring break wellness API. And if you scroll down a little bit, it does have some general information about what each one is. But the idea is take the topic, throw some creativity into it, and see what you can do with it, where you want to take it. It's open to all languages, all frameworks, all skill levels. Take part. I will go through and I'll be doing code reviews on everyone that submits an entry. So if you are a junior developer and you want someone to give you an honest code review, take part, and the top 10 places win a prize. So in first place, we'll be doing a lifetime subscription to Code Course, as well as a copy of Laravel Herd Pro for a year's license for that. Then in position 2 to 10, you'll get an annual Code Course subscription. And if you're position 2 or 3, you'll also get an annual license for Laravel Herd Pro, which means that you can run a local PHP server. You don't have to worry about homebrew. You don't have to worry about versioning. You can quickly swap. It's got mails and debugging all built in on Laravel Herd Pro, which is awesome. I haven't bought it for myself yet, but I'm giving it away. So take part.
How much would that cost? Laravel Herd Pro, how much we're looking at? What the
I believe it is about $300-400.
Right.
I've actually got a spreadsheet somewhere. Laravel Herd Pro for the annual license, I believe it's either $100 or like $299, $399, one of those. Then the Code Course subscription. I've known Alex for a long time, good friends with Alex, and you can learn a lot from Code Course, and not just specifically PHP. He dives into Vue, did some Flutter stuff. He does occasionally do some Slim stuff, but it's good general all-around learning. So you can win a subscription to Code Course.
All right. Sounds brilliant. Yeah, thanks very much for sharing that, Steve. What I've done, folks, is I've put a link there in the chat, and what I'm also going to do, I'll put it in the description for people who watch it when they're recording, but there's also a form where if you want to enter, it's just an email address, is that right? So
email it. There's a couple of questions. So it'll ask you your email address, which one you want to build, if you've already got a Treble account, because the way that this will be judged is we'll judge it based on the code quality as well as the quality of the API. So Trevor will help us judge that and also help you build your API to be better at the same time.
All right, sounds really cool. I'd definitely give that some thought, folks. And if you've got any questions or any thoughts regarding it about, whether you think you'd be good enough or whatever, or just come back to myself or Steve, and we'll answer any questions you've got. But I'd highly recommend you get involved. Have your code reviewed by experts, and I think you'll learn an awful lot, and there'll be a lot of value to gain from doing something like this. I think it's a really good idea and it looks really cool.
During the hackathon, we're actually releasing videos on YouTube on our Treble YouTube channel. So there'll be educational content released throughout the hackathon. And during the day, we'll be doing office hours on our Discord channel. So the only thing we can't do is write the code for you. Think of it like if you were at work and you were struggling with a problem, you turn around to another developer and ask for help. They might not write the code for you, but they can talk you through the problem. I will be on our Discord during the week. Anytime you want to have a chat, I can jump on a screen share, I can jump on a call, and I can walk you through your problem and help you solve it yourself. We're not expecting you to be solo, do it on your own and just figure it out. If you want that extra help, we're there to provide it. Because the whole point of hackathons is to learn and grow, and the only way you can do that is if you get the adequate support.
Exactly. I love it. Sounds brilliant. I hope a lot of people get involved, and I hope that it's a great success for you.
Thank you very much.
So, we'll start. So I've said I'm going to give something away. So here we go. I think what we'll do is the giveaway will be any course which currently exists on Gary Clark Tech plus PHP API Pro when it's actually released. So we need a question.
I will throw in a PHP Storm license.
Get in. I might even enter this myself. What I do with PHP Storm? Should I reveal this? I basically use no, I'm not going to reveal this. Forget I ever said anything because everyone's thinking, yeah, ignore that.
Tell you what, okay. I'll go one further, and I will also include a copy of Ash Allen's working with third-party APIs book.
Consuming third-party APIs?
Yeah, I'll include that. But I will need to talk to you, Gary, about getting the book delivered to them because it is a physical copy. All
right, no problem. Yeah, absolute timeless classic. Yeah. So, Ash is spot on. I can't recommend his stuff highly enough. You can actually buy some of his stuff on Gary Clark Tech. Right. So I think what question should we have, Steve? Should we ask about one of these operations? Maybe pot request or something? Okay, here we go. It's going to be like fastest finger first kind of thing. All we need to know is a put request safe? I just need a yes or no in the comments. The first person to fire it, the correct answer has won.
I don't know if you can hear that, but I'm doing a drum roll.
Right. The first person to answer has won all those things that we said that has won. Okay, and we have a winner. I think.
Yes, we've got a winner.
Right.
Laravel Media won. Oh.
So we said, is a put request safe? The answer is no. And so that goes to Laravel View Media. You've won PHP API Pro, any other course of mine, plus Ash Allen's, plus a PHP Storm license, was it, Steve?
A PHP Storm license and the Ash Allen physical copy book. I will just need your details, Laravel View Media. So if you can reach out to Gary, I can get the book to him, or if you want me to send it, I can send it.
Give me a shout, buddy, and congratulations. I think that's the best prize ever released on the internet.
Yeah, I mean, maybe next time I'll have a spare elephant, but I'll try and get some more.
I don't own a single PHP elephant. Can you believe that?
Wait, I have got
1 million.
Yeah, shelves full at the minute. I'm actually getting a new office, which means I'll have more elephant storage.
Right. Right. I'm going to have to get some. Let's
Definitely.
wrap it up. Oh, one more thing to remember. Tim's blog. So here's one of my proteges, Timothy Aloba. He just wants to help other people. He's started doing a blog about just PHP fundamentals, object-oriented programming fundamentals. His latest one this week is about return type declarations. It's absolutely brilliant. These things are getting better and better each week. So make sure you give him a follow, show him some support. He's a young lad. He's just starting out and doing this stuff. And so builds confidence, gives him the encouragement to keep going and keep delivering this awesome content. And I'll leave links to Tim's stuff in the description as well. Thanks very much for joining. I think 2 weeks sounded quite good. Like I did the first 2 streams, there was like a week between each of them, and it was kind of hard because to actually produce content for the course and also to get ready for live streams at the same time. So 2 weeks in between, I think each one feels like it might be optimal. Plus, I'll be skiing in Austria next week, and so I won't be able to stream anyway. But we'll go with every 2 weeks. I'd like to thank Steve. Thanks very much for coming on. This has been absolutely brilliant and enlightening. I'm sure people have learned a lot of cool stuff from this, and I'm sure we'll do it again. I'll have to come on your channel next.
I will. I haven't streamed for like 5 weeks. I've been way too busy, but I am planning the next few streams, and I'll get you in. We'll do something with Slim PHP because you can refresh my memory.
That would be so cool. That would be so cool. We'll do something with that. It's a date. Happy Valentine's Day, Steve.
Yeah, I better go spend the rest of it with my wife.
Yeah. When we did schedule this, I did think, hang on, that's Valentine's Day. I hope he doesn't back out on me. Thanks very much.
I didn't realize until my wife pointed it out.
By which time you were committed.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. Thanks for joining, folks. I think this has been our best one yet. I've really enjoyed this. And
a lot of fun.
I'll see you on the next one. Cheers, folks. Bye now.